Hello, data natives. Right on. It is an absolute pleasure and fantastic to be back for another iteration of this conference. So far, been a fantastic lineup. My name is Martin Lopatka. I work on research engineering and data science at Mozilla. I'm here today to talk to you about the biggest data that I know of, the world's largest shared public resource, the web. So at Mozilla, we build a browser. Perhaps some of you have heard of it. It's called Firefox. And as part of doing that job, we need to know a little something about the web, about the waters that it must sail. And today I want to keep the topic at a pretty high level of abstraction, talking about the morphology of the web. And when I say morphology, I'm talking about the structure, the sort of connectivity of the web at a page level, but also as a whole entity, and less about the function. So indeed, my group at Mozilla, we do some research into the fundamental nature of the web, and I'd like to talk to you about a little bit of historical stuff, a little bit about the content, what the implications are for this for technology, and a little bit about the browser itself. So super quick disclaimer, the opinions in this presentation are my own, not necessarily those of Mozilla. I think you've seen probably one or two of these today. Right on. Who remembers the 2003 web? The good old days. Wikipedia was young. We're talking under 100,000 articles in just a handful of languages. Reddit did not exist, nor did Facebook. Facebook was going to launch next year, 2004. Google had just rolled out PageRank. This was this was new. PageRank was a new concept at that point, and would not yet be a household name for a couple years. And again, yeah, Facebook didn't exist. This visualization, it's pretty famous. Probably you've seen it before. It's from the Opti project, Barrett Leon. It's based on crawl technology, the technology that we have historically used for studying the web, for understanding the nature of the web, the nature of this entity. At the time that it was produced, this was the most complete map of the connectivity of the web, and it represents sort of like an interesting picture. It's sort of a artwork, but also a data visualization, and yeah, pretty interesting. At this time, the majority of links, and again, this is perhaps a weakly substantiated statement, but the majority of links on pages were placed there by content creators. People made content, put it on the web, people or companies, and then linked to other content. Fast forward a few years, boom, similar technology, again, fantastic work from the Opti project. We've got a massive difference in terms of the morphology. We've jumped from 30 million in 2003, this was about 30 million top-level domains registered, to 314 million. It's an order of magnitude increase. The color coding in these visualizations corresponds to the geographic location of the IP registrar. So we see a lot more different places in the world starting to participate in the web. But also, we are starting to see the emergence of algorithmically generated outbound links on pages. This is the time where the hottest buzzword of the day is search engine optimization, SEO, and it won't be until the following year that Google introduces a weighting scheme in PageRank that penalizes just link farming, like crazy algorithmic link farming out to a whole bunch of pages. So at this time, the game is try to get as many meaningful outbound links to get your page up on top. But also, dynamic content presentation is massive. This is happening everywhere. Around this time, the online advertisement market is estimated at $125 billion globally. So indeed, just on the morphological level, just in the scale between these two images, we start to see the emergence of these hyperlinked nodes on the periphery, these pages that are just linking out to these things, but also isolating from other hyperlinked nodes. So this sort of community, what I'll call siloification. You get these tightly knit communities. And in 2017, we started to study this. We were very interested in looking at what is causing these hyperlink nodes that don't play well with others? And through a series of academic collaborations between Mozilla, the Information Language Processing Institute at the University of Amsterdam, and a bunch of Canadian undergraduate interns, we did a research project investigating the nature of these hyperlinked nodes in terms of their morphology, but looking at the page level what was going on. This led us down a path of trying to cluster pages, not based on the hyperlinks on the page itself, but based on the third-party resources that those pages were touching. So things that looked like advertisement content, possibly tracking, possibly just nice JavaScript libraries that someone else was graciously hosting and you wanted to make use of without having a first-party copy of that. And we started to cluster and group pages from a massive web crawl that we were able to do in terms of these third-party relationships. And then after creating these clusters, we were able to superimpose the actual hyperlinks. So, shocking to us at that time, there were fewer hyperlinks going between pages that were part of different advertisement communities. That's right. So the actual links going between content, not necessarily from page content to advertisement, but between content-related pages, was being somehow influenced by what advertisers you chose to embed on your page. This was the first indication that we saw of like a real impact on, indeed, this morphological level of the web based on advertisement and third-party context. So it's hard to talk about the morphology totally in isolation without thinking about the traffic, right? We can make all these claims about there's links going here, there's links going there, but actually at the end of the day, we don't know whether people follow them. We know that people do have other ways of browsing the web than just following a link. You can type in a URL directly and visit an element. You can get a message from a friend. There's tons of ways to navigate around the web that it's not just following hyperlinks. So we did a small study with an opt-in group of participants. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And we found some startling discoveries about the diversity of web browsing traffic at that time in 2017. So in the study that we were able to carry out, 40% of the total web browsing traffic that was observed in the study, and this is quite a large sample, could be attributed to only the 65 top-level domains. Remember, this is at a time where there's like 400 million pages to choose from, and 40% of the traffic is just going to these 65 big players. A little bit more extreme, we could see that 22% of all traffic observed in that study could be accounted to Google, Facebook, Amazon, Yahoo, and Reddit. This is 2017, so Reddit was a little bit higher up in the Alexa rank at that time. Around the same time that we were carrying out this research, there was a really nice piece of research that came out from a group called Comme Ci Comme Ça, and they were deploying a similar technology to the earlier stuff that I was talking about, so crawlers. They had used a sample of the common crawl data corpus and combined with the easy block list, which is actually the rule set that powers ad blockers like AdBlock Plus, and I believe uBlock Origin, at least in part. And so they matched against 22 million plus domains and found that based on that easy block list, 52.5 or just over 52% of those pages were serving advertisements. So the impact of advertisements on like the large-scale sort of picture of the web is fairly ubiquitous at this point. And again, we don't know the association between those specific pages and the traffic, but just in terms of getting an idea for how widespread this kind of relationship is. In a fantastic presentation that René de Rista did at this year's MozFest, talking about social media platforms and their abuses, she called the modern shape of the web is a infrastructure purpose-built for advertisement, and talked a lot about how algorithmic link generation and the slow emergence of silos can be weaponized in terms of content delivery. So from my perspective, looking at the morphology, it kind of tells a story about what's available to people. I don't want to dig too deep into like the content access side of the story. I think you can all sort of put the pieces together for yourself. But as we emerge a sort of platform, social media platforms and content aggregators are optimizing on sustained engagement on site or sustained engagement in ecosystem. This doesn't necessarily target or optimize or prefer content based on its quality. It prefers content based on its engagement, likeliness or likelihood of keeping you inside that ecosystem and inside that page. And we see this also in terms of the dynamic selection of which links are going to be surfaced when you're at a particular page. Some people might have heard of this in a term called clickbait. So things that are very attractive to get you to click on that keep you inside a particular ecosystem. Another example is being able to surface content within a particular ecosystem. Hypothetically, let's say you're on Facebook and you want to read your news. From a sustained engagement on-site perspective, it's preferable that you consume your news content on Facebook. That way, information about which news stories you prefer and engage in are available. And that's very, very attractive to companies that make their revenue in terms of advertisement. Small note on that, this presentation, the statistic was floated that about 60% of American adults get their news from Facebook, 2018. So, not surprisingly, when we look at the pages that are doing the best in terms of traffic on the web, in this possible model, I'm not implying a causal relationship per se, but with the arguable exclusion of Wikipedia, 9 out of the top 10 optimize on sustained engagement on site. These are companies that benefit from you being exposed to their ecosystem and maintain activity inside that ecosystem for as long as possible. They are social media and commerce platforms, as well as search engines. So, zooming back in, looking back down at the per-page level, what is the ecology? What are the types of links that have contributed to this very large morphological change in the overall structure of the web, piece by piece? And again, this largely is algorithmic link generation. We have retargeting, where you click on a piece of content, and rather than being immediately directed to that piece of content, you're first retargeted through a page that tags you as the kind of consumer who likes that kind of content in order to build a nice advertisement profile that's very, very valuable. And then you're redirected back to the content. But from a link structure, that route exists now. So a link has been made between the page to the advertisement site that's putting that cookie on you as a particular kind of media or content consumer, and then redirecting to where you actually wanted to end up. Obviously, I think you've all been browsing the web for quite a while. Think to yourself the amount of page real estate that advertisement takes up now compared to the good old 2003 web. The amount of the volume of advertisement, just in terms of the way that content is presented to us, has increased drastically because it's so lucrative. And again, this isn't about advertisement is bad. It pays for a lot of web content, but it is affecting the shape of the web fundamentally. Real-time bidding strategies are where pages, based on these profiles that are being created by advertisers about you, at any moment where you visit a page, there are certain advertisements that want to pay more or less depending on how good a match your perceived online profile is to the specific type of advertisement that they want to surface, and you might get a completely different advertisement than I do going to the exact same page on the exact same moment. So these crawler concept of the mapping out the web based on page-to-page links, it doesn't really handle that well if we can't be sure that that crawler is getting the same links as I am, or even that any two people are getting the same links on any page at any given time. And finally, linking. This is something that's like exploded in prevalence, where you have embedded social widgets that are trying to draw you back into other ecosystems. So they're spread out on pages that may not necessarily already be part of that ecosystem as a way to get that content and that attention, that sustained engagement back into a particular social media platform. And again, this is purely at the technology level. These are all sorts of link types and behavior on the page that has led to fundamental changes in the shape of the web. So this is nicely summarized by this quote from Kalev Lataru in an article he did for Forbes magazine about, indeed, like why it's so hard to use web crawlers to study the modern web. And I'll give you a second just to parse through that. I won't read it out. But essentially, yeah, he touches on the fact that we're not in a static model anymore. The web is dynamic. It might be completely different if we continue going this way for each individual person. And you see that already in some of these high volume pages. For example, when you log into Facebook, what you're seeing is very different than what I'm seeing, but we're both at facebook.com. So this is our research stack for understanding the web. It's a little simplified, sort of abstract version. As I mentioned, we have an opt-in sample up at the top. This is a data collection mechanism so that we can see sort of what it looks like to get a page when you are a particular browser user. And then we have a pretty substantial crawler platform that we're running pretty regular cadence crawls. We're now using OpenWPM, which is a fantastic technology for looking at that. And this drives our fundamental understanding of the web, which in turn provides insights about the web that can be converted back into useful information driving product development for the browser. So I talked about an opt-in sample. The question came, very, very naturally for a company like Mozilla with a very strong value proposition in terms of privacy. How do we get that information? How do we figure out what the web looks like for people without being creepy and in a privacy-respectful way, collecting information about the client's actual experience on the web? We ask. The Pioneer program is 100% opt-in. It is off by default. We try to get people to participate in the program. You install a web extension. We have a human-readable privacy policy where we actually hope that you understand what you're contributing when you sign up for the Pioneer program. So the slides will be available. You can feel free to check it out. We talk about it online. And essentially, the opt-in mechanism is a web extension that you install that allows us to do slightly more data collection than we do for the default browser. Speaking of work in the open, I know all of you, as many other speakers have said, identify as data natives. Here it is. This is our last big web crawl. We have a 70 gigabyte corpus of the JavaScript execution traces from our last crawl at the end of 2017. That was the basis for a lot of our advertisement research. It's available online. Get your hands dirty. There are notebooks to get you started. There's a community that we're building around doing data science in the open. And there's a lot of interesting analyses that have already come out of this data corpus. And we hope to get more enthusiasm and more interaction around this. It's at Overscripted. And as I said, there's great analyses that are being put up by the community all the time. So the work that I've presented here, not all me, actually very little of it I've done myself. There's a huge amount of people who contributed, including people from my team. Definitely want to give an extra thanks to the Mozilla Ops, security engineering, the students, the interns that we interacted with making this possible for the Overscripted collection, the interns that were responsible for the advertisement stuff, and some other people at Mozilla who acted as mentors and helpers to drive that project forward. And as I said, don't worry about taking pictures or grabbing links. This slide deck is available on my GitHub, including all the links to the resources that I've talked about. Thank you so much for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the conference.